The browser is absolutely the new enterprise workspace, right? Like most of what people do, like accessing apps, data, internal systems, AI tools, like happens right there. Many, I think, still think that the browser is just a window to applications, but the truth is there is phishing starting there, the credential threats that are happening there, the malicious sites that are accessed, unmanaged extensions running, sensitive data that can be copied. So yeah, with this also the hybrid work, the AI adoption accelerating, I think that surface is growing. It is clear that AI is transforming the way we work, right? You mentioned Copilot. Copilot is becoming part of the daily workflow. Like I truly use Copilot all the time. But with that power, of course, it comes the new category of risk that security leaders need to be aware, need to take seriously. In my opinion, security leaders need to double down on like three key things on this topic, right? Like knowing where your sensitive data is, controlling who has access to that data, and then continuously monitoring that access.
As a woman who has risen to senior security leadership, what advice would you give to others navigating similar paths?
So my advice would be like, don't
Today, we have Alejandra Artíguez, Director of Security at Microsoft for Europe South. Alejandra has built her security career at some of the largest companies in the world, with stops at Accenture, Standard Chartered Bank, and over 6 years at AWS before joining Microsoft. I'm excited to dig into her insights today. Welcome to the show, Alejandra.
Thank you, John. I'm really excited to be here with you today and to talk about security.
And me too. It's like one of my favorite subjects. Um, so your career has taken you from consulting to banking and now to cloud security across both Singapore and Europe. What initially drew you into the world of security?
Yeah, good question. So I'm a computer engineer by background, right? By education. So technology has always been my home. No matter whether I was in, as you say, consulting, banking, now in security. And the truth is, when you are a developer or a technical auditor or a compliance specialist, security is always there, right? It is that thread that connects everything. So working in financial institutions, I spent years helping them interpret the regulators, what the regulators were asking for. But at some point, I realized that I didn't just want to explain the rules, the requirements, but I wanted to help organizations implement them. I wanted to be closer to the controls, to the architectures, to the real challenges that the teams were really facing. And that is what pulled me deeper into cybersecurity. And once I made that move, I really noticed I discovered something that I thought it was powerful. Security is one of the tech areas. I don't know if you think the same, if you agree, but security is one of the areas of tech where people work with a real sense of purpose, right? Like security professionals have a cause, and it's kind of like we wake up every day like trying to make organizations safer, to protect people, to stay on top of the threats. And I think it's really important. Like we can really impact communities, economies, like trust. So that combination of things, like the technical challenge, the mission driven nature of the work, and also the ability to help customers is what is what keeps me in security, what makes me be passionate about this field.
Yeah, one of the things I like about security, and I do agree with you. I think that the fact that we have a cause that we're trying to protect the business and we're trying to protect the business's customers and we're trying to protect people that are inside the organization, that whole protect mission, it is a nice cause to have. I mean, it is different. I think the other and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. One of the other things I think is nice about cyber in particular and security in general is that we get to be involved in all aspects of the business. Like wherever there's
Yep.
technology that the business is part of, whether that's marketing, sales, accounting, um, whatever, we get to see like everything that's happening from a technology perspective also, and apply our trade across the business um, in that way, which I think is very interesting. I love learning about how businesses operate, why they make the decisions that they make, why they make these technology choices, and then and then the what causes me to get gray hair is how do I protect it,
Yeah,
but
no, you're right. And I think like that is a change that we have seen in the past years, right? Like how security and how people understand that security is a business enabler, right? That is not a blocker. I'm really happy to see that now security like CISOs are part of the are communicating with the board of directors and are part of those business conversations. I truly agree.
yeah, and I see that more in my new role here as a field CISO. Um, it's interesting how third party risk management and everything kind of has evolved over the last maybe 10 years. I think we're way more security is way more important to a lot of conversations, especially in the SaaS world. And we'll get into cloud and SaaS products and stuff like that, and how that kind of fits into the security posture of businesses. But but I think that what's interesting is like being on this side and seeing the security questionnaires and having to respond to them and explain how the technology works has been very interesting as well. But
Mhm.
it's definitely evolved over the last 10 years. Um,
Yeah.
where I think most people didn't really have questionnaires, and they most people really didn't have um requirements of their vendors to have like SOC 2, Type 2, or other kinds of things like that. I think today, and this goes back to the business enablement part, is that those are things that the sales team that I'm working with need to have so that they can, go into enterprise accounts, right? And
Yep.
getting all those security pieces together makes it easier for business to take risks working with third parties. And I imagine you've seen that a lot with your work at AWS and Microsoft now and such. I mean, are you seeing more of that as well? Or
Yeah, and not only that, but also the evolution of that exercise, right? Like how automation is being part of that. Because in the past, you used to rely on like who is replying to those questionnaires, right? Like does that person really know everything about the business, everything about the technology? I think now with the automation and with AI, we really see an evolution, and I think we can trust more those processes, right?
sure, yeah, absolutely. I think automation plays a big role in us actually having some idea of what's going on. Um, like you said, I remember, data centers and having to do PCI certifications and going through that work. And when you have like physical data centers and you have an IT team that's over there doing something, your controls kind of go out of whack because you have some systems that are literally physical machines that are racked and stacked in the data center. Then you have virtual machines, and the company that I was working with, they were getting into Kubernetes and those kinds of things, but that was really in the cloud, which was a little bit that was a much easier to understand what your pieces and parts are. But in the data centers, it was really hard to know what the status of anything was, right? And then we would get up to 100% coverage on our virus protection in the data centers and the physical data centers, and then somehow by the time we went to PCI again, we'd be back at like 40% or something. And it was like always like, how did we lose all this control? How did we go from really good status of this one little control to, just failing altogether? And, that whole idea of continuous monitoring really was a very difficult concept to get through um, in physical data center days, right?
Yep.
Whereas in the cloud, we have so many tools and technology to automate the gathering information so that we can have some semblance of continuous so that we can have some semblance of continuous monitoring, that it's made it easier in a lot of ways. And I think that's what you're saying about the automation, right?
Yeah, and even like the step before the gathering the information, even having the inventory of your resources, right? It was so
Mhm.
painful in the past. You
Yeah,
were
yeah.
like talking about that example of like physical data centers. So yeah, absolutely. I think and that is what, as I said, like it's really exciting, right? Like working in technology and working in security because the evolution is like nonstop.
Yes, yes, absolutely, nonstop. Um, and I think that's one of the things that keeps me interested in it too, is just the evolution. I mean, the constant evolution. There's always something else to learn. Well, tell us more about your role at Microsoft. What does security look like at that scale?
Yeah, so I was talking with someone at the office today about this, and I would say the same. Like, it's really interesting about Microsoft that you don't fully grasp the scale or the potential impact until you are inside. Like, of course, everybody knows how big Microsoft is, but like until you are really inside, like you feel the responsibility immediately. And for me, again, that was important because well, first, I will never join a company that does not take security seriously. And at Microsoft, I really see that is not a slogan, right? It's something that we do every day. Um, in the way we improve the internal processes, we respond to threats, the commitment that we bring to our customers. So in this role that I have today, which is I'm the director of security for the customer success unit in Europe South. In this role, I have the privilege of working with customers across the region to help them strengthen the security posture, to solve real world challenges, to innovate in a tech landscape that, as we are saying, is moving and evolving faster than ever. So yeah, the scale is important, and is we have the chance to have that real impact. I also have an amazing team of security CSAs that are very passionate, like myself, about what they do. And they share that same mission, right? Like helping organizations stay secure, unlock what is possible with technology. And something that I think is like I'm very proud of something that we are building internally as well here in that region is that a strong security community and that real culture of security. I like I would be interested to hear from you as well, but I think at Microsoft scale that is really powerful because when and in any organization, like having that culture of security, like when you combine the technical expertise with a culture that prioritizes security, the impact that you can have in like your organization or customers, industry, society is really enormous, right? So the scale is really energizing, right? Having that scale plus the technical expertise and security culture.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that my son worked for Microsoft and he was like on the Azure team and he was in this little I think he was like in a cloud metrics team. And he was very far away from customers, right? And actual problems, he was kind of dealing with like how do they monitor whether um, bucket storage is down or something like that. That's what the kind of stuff he was doing. So he was kind of far away from the customer. I think that that definitely I think having well, let's talk about community for a second. When you're talking about
Mm.
community, you're thinking about the community inside of the organization and who you work with inside Microsoft, or are you talking about the external community and the customers, or both, right?
Yeah, I would say both, but like taking first the internal, and it's not only applicable for Microsoft, but I think for every organization. As you know, we have a gap in the security workforce, right? And like there are
Mhm.
not enough security professionals, so I think organizations would really need to build that security, internal security community that not only have the people with security in their title, but really, like everyone needs to understand, that security is their responsibility, and I think having those champs and having that community is really important. And then in our case, of course, like we also have the external community that is really important for us, and really powerful to
Mhm.
scale and to broaden the to scale the message, right?
Yep. Yeah, I definitely feel like, in my observations, and you've had many more observations of security teams than I have, and we can talk about this and compare and contrast. But my observations has always been that there's way more work um, for the security team to do, right? Than there is security people,
Of course.
and then it makes sense. Um, but I also think that the because of just the number, I think the number of like skilled, passionate security people generally in organizations, I think they kind of get broken up into like two camps. One's, folks that are like, they're really passionate about security. And then you have a group of people that are in security that are, that, it's a job. They come in, they do their job and they leave and they're not really passionate about it. They don't feel the cause, the mission, that kind of stuff. They're there and they get important work done. Um, but I think that then there's what you're saying, I think, is that it's like you can't really just rely on this small group of people when you have uh, gaps in the ability to fill those positions and get the passion that you really need to really move that security program forward. You gotta engage the rest of the business in it, right? And I know that, most recently when I was at Dyson, we provided training to all of the development community on, like, how to write secure code, right? And what we had is, like, you were a white belt, yellow belt, brown belt, black belt. They kinda have, like, different skill levels for that program so that those people, as they moved and got better at security and just writing code, they got something back from it, something to
Yeah, some rewards or
some
something. Yeah.
reward for it, right?
Mhm.
And, and then of course, it's the communications because, security can't be everywhere all the time, so we need people in the organization that also understand what it is that we're trying to do so that if something goes awry, they know who to contact. Because a lot of it is also just communications. It's like if they need help somewhere, how do they get help? And if you don't have you know, uh, good touch points inside the organization, then it makes really difficult for you as a security, CISO to make sure that everything's going to be okay, right? Or getting that feeling like everything's going to be okay. And yeah, so I think that's it's super important to build that internal champion, internal capability, and make sure that everyone understands, what security is. But it's more than just the. I think it's more than just the annual security awareness training that needs to happen, right? There needs to be more
Yeah.
community, right?
The community needs to be like really engaged, right? Like you need to
Yep.
have a community that is like talking all the time, that is sharing what is happening, what are the security news, new whatever vulnerabilities. Like they need to be engaged. So it's the of course we need the training, but then we need also like those like to find the ways or the places that works. So in our case, like we're doing internal sessions for the technical community. We are providing, as you say, some rewards to keep the community engaged. We are like also, doing like those channels or chats so people can share and they don't need to wait for that session. So those are the things that are quite simple, right? But it's not that easy to really have a community that show up in every call and is
Yeah.
there to help.
Yeah, like brown bag lunches where you can talk about a
Mm.
security topic and those kinds of things. And like you said, keeping people engaged. It's almost like internal marketing, You're right. Yeah, it's you're trying to, like, maintain a community, and I think it's harder than I think people generally think.
Yep.
I'd love to, really talk to someone that has done a really great job with building the community inside of the organization. I mean, I need to go through my Rolodex and maybe your Rolodex, and we can find someone that's super good at building community inside of a company.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
Yeah.
probably know some people, I would bet. Well, anyways, well, let's talk about financial services and cloud security, because I think those have been two big parts of your life in the last, decade, probably.
Yep.
Um, with your experience at well, what kind of unique challenges does the financial sector face that other industries kind of underestimate? I mean, I think with your Accenture background, you worked in the finance sector, then you worked with AWS and with Microsoft. I think you've seen a broad group of different companies, right? I mean, I was a manufacturing company when you and I first met. So, you're getting to see a lot of different industries. What what challenges are unique to the financial sector, and what do other industries underestimate there?
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right. Like I had the chance to work with and for financial institutions. They face a level of security pressure that I think many industries underestimate. So when you work in a bank, like I did, you quickly realize that you are not just protecting data, right? You are protecting trust, you are protecting country financial stability, and you're protecting at the end like people's livelihoods, right? So the stakes are huge, and one of the biggest misconception outside of the industry is really how fast and relentless the threat landscape is. Banks are attacked constantly. Nation states, organized crime, highly sophisticated malicious actors, they all see financial institutions as prime targets, right? And the margin for error is basically zero. Um, Another thing that I think people underestimate is the regulatory complexity. As you know, in financial services, a highly regulated industry, you are not dealing with one framework or with one regulator. You are dealing with layers of global, regional, national regulations that are evolving continuously. And then you talk about innovation, like fintech. Fintech has pushed the industry to innovate at a speed that was, we could not imagine a decade ago. We have open banking, APIs everywhere, digital onboarding, real time payment. Of course, all of those things customers love, but each of those open a new attack surface. So financial institutions don't have the luxury of choosing between innovation or security. They need to do both at a scale. And I think when you work again in a bank, you'd realize that, yeah, security is for sure not something that is optional. It is existential. Like that is the only way to be in business.
Yeah, I think you're right. One is it's the multi-layer of uh, the regulators that you have in, like Singapore or Southeast Asia, Japan versus Korea, and you have banks that are working in all of those different environments, including Europe and including the United States, and the capabilities that they're trying to roll out for, everyone is just different. I mean, for example, in like Singapore, which you and I were just living in Singapore a year ago, we could make, fast payments to people, easily, right? We could just pay any vendor with our bank accounts just anytime. And that's still something that's not present in the United States. Even though it's the same banks that are doing it, like HSBC or JP Morgan Chase or whoever that are doing this kind of stuff in Asia, we don't see that in the United States, and I think a lot of it has to do with regulatory pressures, right? Because you can innovate, and you may be able to innovate in one part of the world because you have maybe better relationships with the regulator. Like, I think Singapore has really good relationships between the banks and the regulators, and they kind of work together. I think it's a little bit harder in the United States when you have like 50 different states and everyone's kind of doing things at a state level than at the federal level. And then, it just makes it, I think, more complicated.
Mm,
Um, but I think that's definitely one thing that I think people don't really see that makes finance complicated. I think the other thing is just the customer side, because like you said, you have these nation states and these fraud and criminal organizations that are attacking the bank, and that is true. But on the other side is that they're also attacking your customer base all the time. So you have a lot of account takeover kind of problems and stuff and then you can't I remember, being in the SOC at JP Morgan Chase and seeing the kind of attacks that were happening in our customer environments. And it was crazy because they were running this is a long time ago, so this won't be as bad, but like there were tons of customers that were running Windows XP with, IE6 and, there was nothing we could do to protect them. Right? But we couldn't get them to upgrade, so we had there was some amount of risk if they're gonna be involved with your
yeah.
banking that you as a bank also have to take and protect against, right? And it's just this weird, highly, um, targeted industry that is so important to different countries and how they, and the faith in the financial systems is really important. And it has a lot of regulation, right? I
Yeah.
think that's a different kind of uh, threat, landscape than I had in manufacturing, which was, I think I didn't have any regulators that were bothering me at all, right? Just
Yeah.
manufacturing, which is crazy, right? When when you think about it, but um, but really it was like regulation light compared to like when we were doing things in finance. But from that perspective, is that something that other people don't see is the amount of regulation or the frequency of attacks and the sophistication of the attacks? Is that the thing that makes the finance sector different?
Well, I think it's when you are like, as I said, a prime target, you just get everything, right? Like you get the more sophisticated and the less sophisticated, but you get them all the time. So I think it's more about the sophistication for sure. Because if you are a good target, then you will have those malicious actors that have more resources and are able to
Mhm.
like go and like complexity is something that we see in how malicious actors are now attacking, right? Like take AI for example. We are all using AI for sure. The malicious actors are using AI as well. So the complexity and the speed is for sure like one of the challenges that organizations are facing. And if you are like a target, then that's for sure even more challenging.
Absolutely. Well, a little bit. We're not going to fix that today. Um, but with respect to cloud adoption in regulated industries, well, I know that cloud adoption in regulated industries has a lot of scrutiny, right? And
Yeah.
I remember this is, 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, when I was working at JP Morgan Chase, is that we were on the slow boat on, on with respect to like, hey, are we going to adopt the cloud, at the time? And there was a lot of scrutiny about it, I recall. Um, how do you help organizations balance innovation velocity, right? Because you have two kinds of innovation velocity. You have your own internal innovation velocity, and then you have the innovation velocity at the cloud provider, right? I mean, the features and the changes that happen inside of a cloud provider, you know, there's new features that happen every month, like hundreds of features that are being added to the environment every month. How do you balance those velocities with compliance requirements that regulators demand?
Yeah. Good question. Like I think cloud adoption in regulated industries is always that. It's a balancing act, right? Like you have innovation on one side, you have compliance on the other, and the truth is you can't manage that balance if you don't really understand the regulatory environment you operate in, right? We were talking about the complexity of some organizations. Having to meet the requirements from different regulators, and I always when I'm talking about this topic, what I tell organizations is to stay on top of the regulations that apply to you. I know it sounds like super simple, but the thing is, it's not just about what they have today, but how those regulations are evolving, right? Regulators are moving fast. Regulations are evolving, expectations are changing, and you need to be ahead. You cannot be reacting when something is coming. So being, on top of what is coming, I think as much as you can is an important part. And then another part is, and this is something that companies often underestimate, is the importance of having relationships with the regulators and also with your peers in the industry. When I work in Asia and then in Europe, I saw many organizations interpret regulations in a stricter way that the regulators are actually intended, the regulators intended when they wrote it. So sometimes the challenge is not the requirement itself, but it's the anxiety around the interpretation. So when you have that open dialogue with the regulators, with your peers, you understand the objective behind the requirement. I believe it becomes easier to really implement those controls in a more modern way. And that is the key point. I think regulation compliance should never be treated as a checkbox exercise. It should be a mechanism for us to innovate safely, right? I want to think that regulation is there to protect customers, to protect organizations, to ensure stability, to guide us to have good practices and not to block transformation. So I think again, like it's important to understand the why behind a requirement, and then you can design the solutions that are secure, that are compliant. So yeah, I would say like for me, helping regulated organizations strike that balance between clarity, partnership, and mindset is a priority. Knowing your regulatory landscape, talk with your regulators, understand the intent, and then yeah, use compliance for innovation, not as a constraint.
I like your approach. I think that one of the advantages also, and you tell me if you think this is true, is we talked a little bit about just asset management and physical data centers. And if we go back to like NIST cybersecurity frameworks, like first thing you got to know is what you have to protect, right? Identify your assets, understand what they are, et cetera. Um, and I think that's easier to do in a cloud environment, right? If you're like pure cloud, that's all you have, then understanding your assets in the cloud is easier. I mean, we can enumerate it. We're being billed for it. So we're going to be able to enumerate those those assets, right? And
But sorry for interrupting you. One point, I fully agree, right? Like you can easily have an inventory of your resources, but also something that can be a little bit challenging in the beginning for someone that is new to cloud is those resources are changing much faster than on premises, right? Because you can
absolutely.
spin up a resource and then the next day is not there anymore. So that is also something that I think is need to be considered.
Absolutely. I think that one of the biggest challenges for me in like 2018 moving to the cloud was just the ephemeral assets,
Yeah.
especially like, you're scaling Kubernetes clusters up and down, or you're scaling virtual machines up and down and everywhere else. Right. And it's like you have an asset, it wasn't secure. And then we're asking people to patch things that don't exist anymore. Right. And so like that whole idea of ephemerality or how long this asset lives, um, has a lot to do with like there's that I think the negative side of aspects of being in the cloud is that something spins up, something gets spun down and it's gone. And now what do you do with it? Um, but yeah, that being said, I think that that oh gosh, where am I? Where was I going here? I think that in a lot of ways that that velocity, right? The innovation velocity provides a lot of value. I think, the more people that we have within the organization that understand the security tenets of the organization and what it is that we're trying to do from a business perspective, then I think that better off we are, right? But I think from a regulated industries perspective, I think that there are a lot of broken processes inside the company and inside like managing your own data centers. And I feel like there's kind of been that the number of like infrastructure people that we have inside the organization to manage our data centers and everything. I think that we just have fewer of those people as well.
Mhm.
So I think that's also creating some sort of challenge. And I don't know if that's because of the number of cloud operators there have and the number of customers that are in the cloud. It kind of changes what kind of people you need to have inside your company. But in a lot of ways, I feel like there's a lot of reliance that we can have on the cloud providers as well in that shared security model that
Yep.
we probably are getting better capabilities with respect to physical security and the securing of assets in today's cloud environments than I think we had in our own personal data when we had our own data centers. Um, but I'll ask you another question here. What about like, do you feel like the regulators are keeping up with cloud? I mean, I feel my personal opinion what has been that like I look at the compliance regulations and they all still kind of feel like they're made for physical data centers and private offices. Do you feel like the regulations are catching up to cloud, or are we getting better at explaining how our cloud security postures relate to that so that we can get through? I mean, people are getting through their security compliance stuff, but I do feel like there's a gap between the regulators and their compliance activities and how we how we today implement security.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, totally. So the thing is, for example, when I was working in Southeast Asia, right, there were some countries where the regulators were very mature. So they really understood, cloud, and you could see that translated into the way they were writing the regulations. And they were open also for training. So cloud providers were providing, were giving enablement and training to the regulators to explain, how they can translate the old requirements into something that is cloud oriented. And then, of course, there were other countries or the regulators that were behind, right? And you could see that in the guidelines, it was really difficult to translate. It was not clear. It was not prescriptive. It's high level. People were afraid. So that is what I was trying to explain before with the anxiety around the requirements. Also, in some cases, to be honest, there were like regulations that were saying something, but then the regulator or someone within the regulator was telling something else to the organization in closed door meetings, right? So for sure, like years ago, it was like we had more of those cases. I feel that now we are getting better with like having controls again that are, and having regulations and guidelines and requirements that are more in line with the new technology that we have. But
Mm.
for sure there are, I guess, there are still, regulators that need to catch up.
Yeah. I think that's again in multinational corporations. I think that's a bigger concern um, than non multinationals, right? So okay, um, yeah, I guess I guess that I always felt like that was somewhat of a challenge, and you don't want to, or at least from my perspective, I think that um, having people kind of keep up with and just kind of agreeing with what you're saying about you got to have folks that are looking at the regulations in a particular country or region and then keeping up with what's going to change, right? Because I don't think regulations don't change fast. There's a lot of communication that comes from the regulator that lets you know that hey, something else is coming up, right? And, if you don't have the relationship with the regulator, then it's really hard to keep up with what's going on in these different
Yep,
and you don't wanna be surprised, and then all of a sudden,
exactly.
right? And then
And I remember like in some cases, like there were some requirements that were not clear, and we had to advocate on behalf of the customer, and be the the cloud service providers were like asking the regulators because the organizations did not want to be the first asking. Like so yeah. Then that's why to my point, like it's truly important to have that continuous engagement with the regulators as well whenever it's possible. I understand that maybe not all organizations and all regulators are open to that, but I think it's really beneficial.
yeah, it is definitely beneficial. And also I think you also mentioned a little bit about, you know, talking to your peers in the community, like in your country, right? Talking to those people and seeing how they're interpreting those regulations, how they're implementing them, and getting some of that feel for how this is going to happen. I mean, I know that when I was in Japan and we were dealing with the telecom regulator, we often talk to the other big telcos in the country so that we could kind of figure out, like, well, what does this actually mean, right? Does
Yeah.
it I mean, because they have some regulations that are like, you can't inspect any traffic whatsoever. But we have IDSs and IPSs and all sorts of other firewalls that would technically be against against that regulation. But it's never been prosecuted against. And then how people were implementing it, we got a really good feel of like, hey, how could we deal with the regulator just by how our competitors were also meeting those requirements. And that only happens with community, right? So community is
Absolutely.
really important in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
it is.
Um, so we're gonna go from keeping going down. We're gonna get a little bit closer to like people and protecting assets, that humans use every day. Um,
Mhm.
the the browser has become much more important for enterprise work today. I think the number of SaaS apps that are being rolled out, the amount of spend that we have in that IT spends outside of their own internal systems. I think that's like at 51% of all budgets today is like outside, like worldwide. Uh,
Mhm.
and we have users that are able to just add SaaS apps on their own, right? They can just go and they can get onto an app anywhere. From so I guess what I'm saying is that browsers are really becoming important to how we do work today, and a lot of tasks are happening inside the browser. From your perspective at Microsoft, are organizations recognizing how large that attack surface is? When you're talking to them, do they understand, like, there's shadow SaaS and OAuth, and there's little pieces of the environment that are all over the place that their humans are using? What are you seeing with respect to that attack surface, and are people seeing it?
Yeah, you're right. Like the browser is absolutely the new enterprise workspace, right? Like most of what people do, like accessing apps, data, internal systems, AI tools, like happens right there. And of course, that makes also the browser one of the largest attack surfaces in the enterprises. So are organizations fully aware of that? I guess not yet, not all of them. So many, I think, still think that the browser is just a window to applications. But the truth is, there is phishing starting there. The credential threats that are happening there, the malicious sites that are accessed, unmanaged extensions running, sensitive data that can be copied. So yeah, the with this also the hybrid work, the AI adoption accelerating, I think that surface is growing. And from my perspective, awareness is growing, especially again in regulated industries. But the threat landscape is growing too, and that's why we keep, pushing customers to treat the browser as an strategic, piece in the environment. And that is where also, now solutions that we have available are critical for organizations to protect against those malicious sites, that are being used for phishing and for malware. So the good news is I think organizations are starting to understand that change, the shift. They recognize that the browser is no longer passive, but we need to keep, the rising and helping organizations with that awareness. And of course, as I said, like they embracing like those new technologies that can help them move fast and adopt cloud and AI, and at the same time, enforce the right guardrails is, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah, and I think that, with respect to, like, AI tools like Copilot, becoming embedded in enterprise workflows, which I'm sure you're seeing a lot of, how should security leaders think about data leakage risks when it comes to AI adoption?
Well, yeah, it is clear that AI is transforming the way we work, right? You mentioned Copilot. Copilot is becoming part of the daily workflow. Like I truly use Copilot all the time. But with that power, of course, it comes the new category of risk that security leaders need to be aware, need to take seriously. And of course, that is the unintended data leakage, not because I think AI per se is unsafe, but because now people have these incredibly powerful, tools and assistant like sitting next to you. And that assistant is able to access the same data that you have access to. So I would say the foundation to all of that is to have the strong data governance. Um, so, in my opinion, security leaders need to double down on like three key things on this topic, right? Like knowing where your sensitive data is, controlling who has access to that data, and then continuously monitoring that access. And I feel that when many organizations, when they are doing the AI readiness exercise, they discovered that the challenge is not really AI, but it's more their data hygiene and the governance that is not in place. So yeah, that piece of like protecting the data, understanding that now is not only moving through files and emails, but it's also you need to protect the prompts. The attack surface is growing with the new functionalities that we get. And that means needing guardrails, DLP, sensitive labels, conditional access, the whole ecosystem. And then the last thing that I would say for this topic is that leaders need to adopt a mindset of enablement, right? We are talking about security culture, community. Like we shouldn't have fear to AI. We should not slow down innovation because we are afraid of AI. We need to put in place that compliance, governance, security controls to have a safe adoption. So yeah, my message to CISOs out there, like listening to this, secure the data, secure the interactions, and empower your people, right? I think those are the three key pillars for the foundation.
I mean, I'll tell you that I, you know, I was afraid of AI as well, right? But I definitely felt like we needed to get ahead of it, right? It wasn't something that we were going to be able to shove in a corner and hope that it was going to go away. And but I recall, as I was like, getting, because really it was coming out as I was just kind of joining Dyson, and I remember that, um, I saw so much opportunity with it. But what worried me was exactly that, data governance, right? And then, it's that part of it, I think um, and data governance, I think was a big part of what it was for me from a fear perspective,
Mhm.
both from and more from an internal productivity than it was external access, right? I mean, I definitely wanted to have enterprise agreements with whoever it is that we're going to be partnering with on AI, on Gen AI in particular. But it's like you kind of have some way to kind of control where the data flows, right? And like if it not data flow, but where are people getting access? Because if you try to if you try to stop it, people are going to circumvent you anyway, right? You got to give them safe paths that they can use because people are going to adopt it anyway. So um, I think that for me, I was really just kind of focused on data governance, like how can we tag information in the right places so that this information was secure. I was really afraid of like most companies I don't feel are using DLP well, right? They have very, very small use cases in very, very highly sensitive areas or where they think it is. But the amount of unstructured data that we have in OneDrive and SharePoint is somewhat alarming, I think, in some in bigger companies. And I think that's where the data governance kind of needs to be, is really where all that unstructured data is. And I imagine you're seeing the same thing, or am I more pessimistic? Am I being a pessimist here, or do you?
No, I mean, and that's the reason why I say let's not be afraid, right? Because that's what I see, right? Like, of course, and fully agree with everything that you said. Like the reality is that people in the organizations are going to use AI. So if you don't give them the right tools and the right with the right controls, they will do it in the wrong way, and then you're putting your organizations at risk. So fully agree. I mean, I think all of us, we are navigating how to use it, like for what use cases, and then of course how to put it in place in a safe manner. So yeah, I don't think you are a pessimistic. I think all of us, we want to use it. We just want to use it right.
Absolutely, and I think that again, it kind of goes into community, goes into culture. It um, it's one of those things that you probably need champions with inside your organization so that people understand like how to use a browser safely, or not browser safely, so
Yeah.
that people know how to use Gen AI safely. I think from my perspective, there's a lot of that access to Gen AI from a human perspective is through a browser. So having DLP kind of controls and security controls in the browser are going to be better. So I think people need to be focusing on like, hey, how do I put those guardrails in place that allow activity to happen, but have the controls available so that you could do it safely. And
Yeah.
yeah, there it is. That's what it is.
100%.
Okay, so so for closing, right? So as a woman who has risen to a senior security leadership position, what advice would you give to others navigating similar paths?
Yeah, this is a topic that is close to my heart. Well, I want to say, like, first, being a woman in security is not a limitation. Is We all have our superpowers, but also I know that it means that you often walk into rooms, into meetings that where you are the only one that looks like you, and I know that that can be intimidating. And what helped me throughout my journey is embracing that difference, right? My advice, as you ask me for like advice for those that are navigating similar paths. So my advice will be like, don't wait to feel ready to take that next step. I think in our field, in technology, in security, things are moving very fast. And even if you are ready, if you deserve it, you will continue to grow and to learn after you jump. So for me, like every stretch role that I took, it felt as little scary at first, but that is exactly what you need to keep learning, right? And then another point that I think is important is um, to surround yourself with people who lift you, right? Not those that are questioning whether you belong or not in security, technology, in your role or your team. I've been lucky to have mentors and sponsors who were challenging me, but also opening doors to me. So find people like that early, and also as you are growing in your career, like be that person for others, right? And again, just take the place at the table. I think diversity. We are talking in this conversation about how malicious actor are very fast, and like diversity, having different backgrounds, different cultures, different experiences is really something that security needs. The threat actors are creative, and we need to be creative as well as defenders. So it's good to have different voices, right? And curiosity will be like the last thing. Security is evolving, so if you are in security, you will never stop learning. So I'm a computer engineer, but I didn't get here where I am knowing everything. I don't know everything, right? Nobody knows everything in technology. So what is important is to be curious, right? To want to learn more, to go deeper, and to let curiosity be that engine that is motivating you. So yeah, to every woman navigating this path, just I want to tell them that they deserve to be here, that they bring something unique, and that the industry needs them, right? That is my final message for this topic.
I agree with you. I think the industry does need them. I worked with wonderful security professionals that happen to be women. Um, but I love your advice about being curious, right? I love that advice because I think that if you're not curious, it doesn't matter if you're male or female. It's not, maybe security isn't the right place for you because this is a
Exactly.
constantly evolving
Exactly.
kind of activity. Um, and then I think that as we, I think it's important to have diversity of thought. It's not, it's really important to have differences in points of view because even when, as a CISO, I'm working with a community. I mean, there might be 15,000, 20,000, 400,000 people that are inside this organization. They're not all men, right? And so when we communicate, it's really important that we communicate and build that community for all members of the business, not just the men that are in the business, right? And so I think without those kind of different points of view and that diversity of thought and that creativity that comes out of it, I think we lose as a security organization. So,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I agree 100% with you that, don't worry about what, I mean, she'll hate that I said this, but my son's partner, she's also a computer engineer by background. And she always feels like, should she be here? And it's like, yeah, you should be here. It's okay. you know, but but somewhere in this, I don't know why, I don't understand, but we need women in tech. Um, what security approaches do you think enterprises are sleeping on that they should be adopting right now, other than browser security? I already said browser security, so you can't say what.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few security approaches that I think could dramatically improve organization security posture, but are not fully adopted, right? And then I don't think like those are like future priorities or anything like really fancy. Like those should be things that are now priorities, right? And the first one that I would say is identity, right? We are always talking about zero trust, but many organizations still underestimate how important identity is, right? Like how it is the foundation. And without identity, the right identity controls, everything else, it doesn't really matter, right? It's built on sand. So identity is one. Data governance, we talk about that already, and how it is important when you are embracing AI. Proactive threat hunting, maybe that is something that we still need to do better. To With AI, I think right now we have, and with the tools that we have right now in general, we have a level of visibility and correlation that we never had before. So I really think those new technologies are a game changer for security when it comes to threat protection. Yeah, we talk about browser security, and we talk about security as a culture. So that will be also another one that I would say, right? Like how becomes like 10 times more powerful having the right culture in place, not only the technology tools.
Yeah, I'm a plus one on identity, um, because I've had more incidents that cost the company I was working for over $1 million that were just identity problems than any other incident. It wasn't vulnerabilities and other things also happen, but man, the identity one is, I think, a big one that uh, companies continue to get wrong that is something they really should be focusing on.
That
Um, well, very good. I mean, is there just thinking about, one of the things that we can talk about, you know, here or offline who else do you think we should be having on the Be Fearless podcast? Is there anyone that comes to your mind? Any professionals that come to mind, or maybe a role that we should have on the podcast?
Yeah, no, that is a good point. So I have seen incredible topics and speakers that you have already brought to this podcast. Really impressive. One topic that maybe I would propose more than really like I don't have a name right now in mind, but like maybe a topic that we could consider or you could consider is quantum computing, right? Like plus quantum security. I think is still a topic that we don't really, I mean, we know about it, but we don't really know when it's going to become like a real problem, right? So maybe that could be something to consider.
Absolutely. I think, we need to start preparing for, um, we need to start preparing our quantum safe encryption, right? So, but why? We should definitely talk to someone in quantum security about that, and why we should be worried today, and, not wait till, quantum's on our desks to do it. That's a good
Yeah.
suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, again, like it was great to be here with you today, and really interesting topic. So thank you for inviting
Thanks.
me.
Thank you, Alejandra, for being on the Be Fearless podcast.